I laughed at the DNA test, conditioned to be my sister's punchline, but my mother went dead silent. I expected the results to be a humiliating secret, yet they made the estate lawyer call me immediately. My sister thought proving I had a different father would cut me out of the will. Instead, her cruelty triggered a hidden penalty clause my late father had set specifically for this moment, costing her everything. My name is Nora Wood, and for the last 5 years, I have carefully constructed a life that is beige, silent, and entirely predictable. I am 33 years old, and I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Madison, Wisconsin, a place chosen specifically because it is 1,200 miles away from where I grew up. My apartment is on the 3rd floor. It has cream-colored walls, functional furniture that I bought from a catalog, and absolutely no ghosts. I work as a senior risk analyst at North Pine Metrics. It is a company that deals in actuaries and data modeling, a place where emotions go to die and are replaced by spreadsheets. My colleagues like me because I am efficient. I do not gossip in the break room. I do not bring drama to the quarterly reviews. I arrive at 8 in the morning, and I leave at 5 in the afternoon. My life is a series of calculated probabilities, and the probability of anything catastrophic happening to me here, in this quiet corner of the Midwest, is statistically insignificant. That is exactly how I like it. I have spent my entire adult life trying to make myself smaller. It is a survival mechanism I perfected before I even learned how to drive. When you grow up in the Wood family, shrinking is the only way to avoid being cut. We are from Baythorn, Massachusetts. It is one of those coastal towns where the driveways are lined with crushed white seashells, and the air always smells of old money and salt. My family lived in a sprawling colonial estate that looked like it belonged on a postcard. The kind of house that tourists slow down to photograph. To the outside world, the Woods were the standard. We were the benchmark for grace, success, and decorum. But inside that house, the air was so thin it was hard to breathe. My mother, Veronica Wood, does not believe in reality. She believes in the narrative. To Veronica, a family is not a group of people bound by love or blood. It is a visual presentation. Every holiday, every dinner, every interaction was curated for an invisible audience. If I scraped my knee as a child, the concern was not whether I was hurt, but whether the blood would stain the white carpet or if the bandage would clash with my dress for the Sunday brunch. She loves the story of a perfect life far more than she ever loved the people living it. She treats conversations like press releases. Everything has to be angled correctly. Everything has to be lit just right. And then there is Cassidy. My sister is 2 years older than me, and she is everything I am not. Cassidy is the sun, and the rest of us were just planets hoping not to get burned by her gravity. She is beautiful in a sharp, terrifying way. She has our mother's eye for optics, but our father's intellect. Weaponized. Growing up, Cassidy turned every room she entered into a stage. The dining room was her theater. She would hold court at the head of the table, recounting stories where she was always the hero or the victim, but never the villain. She sucked the oxygen out of the room, demanding total attention, and my mother gave it to her willingly. Cassidy was the star. I was just part of the set design, a supporting character who was expected to hit her marks and not bump into the furniture. I learned to be quiet. I learned that if I did not speak, I could not be criticized. If I did not occupy space, I could not be targeted. I became a master of blending into the wallpaper, of watching rather than participating. The only person who ever saw me was my father. Thomas Wood was a man of few words. He built the family fortune through shipping logistics, a hard, gritty business that contrasted with the pristine world my mother tried to maintain. He was a large man with gentle hands, and in a house full of performance art. He was the only thing that felt real. He did not say much at the dinner table while Cassidy monologued and Mother preened, but he would look at me. It was a specific look, over the rim of his wineglass, a small tightening of the eyes that said, "I see you. Nora, I know." He defended me in the quiet ways. When Mother would criticize my hair or my grades, Dad would simply place a hand on my shoulder and squeeze. He would slip me books he knew I would like. He would drive me to school in silence, letting me choose the radio station. He was my anchor. He was the reason I did not completely disappear. But anchors can be lost. My father died 4 months ago. It was sudden, a massive heart attack that took him before the ambulance could even clear the front gates. The funeral was exactly what Veronica Wood wanted. It was an event. There were 300 guests, black lilies imported from Holland that cost more than my car, and a string quartet playing softly in the background. It was dignified. It was cold. It was a production. I stood by the grave, feeling a grief so heavy it felt like physical weights were strapped to my ankles. I could barely breathe. The world felt gray and flat. But when I looked at my mother and sister, I did not see grief. I saw management. Mother was playing the role of the grieving widow with Oscar-worthy precision, accepting condolences with a trembling chin that miraculously never ruined her makeup. But it was Cassidy who chilled me to the bone. Cassidy stood next to the grave, looking immaculate in a tailored black dress. She was not crying. She was not trembling. She looked calm. Not the calm of shock, but the calm of someone who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. There was a glint in her eyes, anticipation. It looked like she was mentally rearranging the furniture in Dad's office before his body was even in the ground. It looked like she was calculating the square footage of her new kingdom. That look terrified me. After the funeral, I fled. I did not stay for the reading of the will. I did not stay to help sort through his clothes. I could not bear to be in that house without him, watching my mother and sister consume his legacy like vultures picking at a carcass. I returned to Madison, to my beige walls and my risk analysis spreadsheets. I told myself I was done. I told myself I would live, as if I had never belonged to them. I would be Nora Wood, the independent woman from Wisconsin, not Nora Wood, the shadow of Baythorn. I spent the last 4 months successfully avoiding them. I sent brief text messages. I used work as an excuse to skip Thanksgiving. I was building a wall, brick by brick, hoping it would be high enough to keep the toxicity out. Then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday evening. I was sitting on my couch, eating takeout noodles and watching a documentary about deep-sea exploration. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with the name, Mother. I stared at it for 3 rings. My training as a risk analyst kicked in. Risk factor high, emotional cost, significant, probability of a guilt trip, 100%. I answered it anyway. "Hello, Mother?" I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Nora?" Her voice came through the line, smooth and polished as glass. "You are hard to reach these days. I was worried." She was not worried. She was annoyed that I was not available on demand. "I have been busy with work," I lied. "Quarterly reports." "Of course," she said, dismissive. "Listen, darling, your birthday is coming up next week." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "I know. I was planning to just have a quiet night here." "Nonsense," she cut in. "You are turning 33. That is a lovely age. We want you to come home, just for the weekend." "I don't think I can get the time off," I said. Another lie. I had weeks of vacation time saved up because I never went anywhere. "Nora," her tone shifted, becoming sharper. "We haven't seen you since the funeral. It looks odd. People ask about you." There it was. It wasn't about missing me. It was about the optics. It looked bad that the grieving daughter was absent. It disrupted the narrative. "I really don't think—" "Cassidy wants to see you," Mother interrupted. "She has been organizing some of your father's things. There are legal matters regarding the estate that are finally moving forward. The lawyers need signatures. We thought we could combine it. A small birthday dinner on Saturday. Just the 3 of us. Family." I gripped the phone tighter. Small birthday dinner. The phrase sounded wrong coming from her. Veronica Wood did not do small, and Cassidy never did anything that didn't benefit Cassidy. "What legal matters?" I asked. "Just formalities," Mother said, her voice breezy. Too light. "The usual bureaucracy, but we can't do it without you, and it would mean so much to me. Nora, the house feels so big without your father. Please, She played the widow card. She knew exactly where the weak points in my armor were. Even though I knew she was manipulating me, the mention of my father made my chest ache. If there were estate matters, I had to deal with them. I couldn't run from the legal reality of his death forever. And a part of me, the small, stupid part that still wanted a mother, wanted to believe she actually missed me. "Just a dinner," I asked. "No parties, no guests. Just us," she promised. "A quiet evening. We can toast to your birthday and to your father's memory. Please, Nora, come home." I looked around my safe, beige apartment. It felt suddenly very lonely. "Okay," I said, against my better judgment. "I will come for the weekend." "Wonderful," she said. The warmth instantly evaporated from her voice, replaced by efficiency. "I will have the guest room prepared. Drive safely." She hung up before I could say goodbye. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank screen of my phone. The silence of my apartment usually comforted me, but now it felt heavy. I had analyzed the risk, and I had accepted it. But as I sat there, a feeling of unease began to crawl up my spine. It was the way she had said small birthday dinner. It sounded rehearsed. It sounded like a line in a script, and the mention of Cassidy organizing Dad's things that made my skin prickle. Cassidy had never organized anything in her life that didn't result in her gaining power. I walked over to the window and looked out at the dark street below. I was going back to Baythorn. I was going back to the stage. I told myself I could handle it. I was 33 years old. I was a professional. I was not the scared little girl hiding in the library anymore. But as I packed my bag that night, choosing my clothes like armor-sharp blazers, neutral colors, nothing that would draw attention, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. I wasn't going home for a celebration. I was reporting for duty in a war I didn't realize had already started. I looked at the framed photo of my father on my nightstand. It was the only picture of family I kept out. He was smiling. That rare, genuine smile he saved for me. "I'll handle them, Dad," I whispered to the photo. I had no idea how wrong I was. I had no idea that the moment I agreed to return, the gears of a machine I couldn't see had started to turn. My mother and sister weren't planning a party. They were planning an execution, and I was driving 1,200 miles to hand them the axe. The drive from Madison to Baythorn was not a journey home. It was a tactical retreat into enemy territory. I spent the hours gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, listening to podcasts about forensic accounting just to keep my brain occupied. I needed the distraction. If I let my mind wander, it would inevitably drift back to the memories of this drive with my father, the way he would point out the changing leaves or the specific architecture of the old barns we passed. Now, the landscape was just a blur of gray highway and expensive toll booths. I told myself I was going back for the legalities. The estate of Thomas Wood was complex, a labyrinth of trusts, assets, and holdings that required more than just a grieving widow's signature. I needed to know where things stood. That was the logical, risk analyst reason. But the emotional truth, the variable I tried to suppress, was that I was tired of running. I had spent 4 months hiding in Wisconsin, letting the silence of my apartment shield me. But silence does not solve problems. It only delays them. If I wanted to truly sever the cord, I had to go back and cut it myself. My phone, mounted on the dashboard, lit up with a notification as I crossed the state line into Massachusetts. It was an automated email from a national courier service. Delivery confirmation. "Your package has been delivered to the front porch." I frowned. I had not ordered anything to the Baythorn address. I tapped the screen to open the full message, keeping one eye on the road. The account was linked to the family's primary email, a shared digital space my father had set up years ago for utility bills and household maintenance. We all had access, though I rarely checked it. The order details were sparse. It was a small package. Priority shipping. The recipient was listed clearly Cassidy Wood. That was strange. Cassidy usually had her endless stream of designer clothes and skincare products sent to her condo in Boston, not the main house in Baythorn. I glanced at the item description. It was abbreviated. cut off by the character limit of the subject line. Gen ID Home Kit, Ancestry Health. A DNA test. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. Why would Cassidy need a DNA test? We knew exactly who we were. The woods had a family tree that was pruned and documented back to the Mayflower. It was one of Mother's favorite conversation starters at charity galas. Perhaps it was for the health screening portion. Maybe she was worried about some genetic predisposition, some flaw in the bloodline that might tarnish her perfection. I swiped the notification away. It was likely nothing, just another one of Cassidy's self-obsessed projects, another way to gaze into a mirror, even at a cellular level. But the timing sat uncomfortably in my stomach. She orders a genetic test to arrive the exact week I return. In my line of work, we call that a correlation worth monitoring. By the time I pulled through the wrought iron gates of the estate, the sun had already dipped below the horizon. The house loomed ahead, a massive structure of white clapboard and black shutters, lit up like a national monument. It did not look like a home. It looked like a stage set for a period drama where everyone dies in the end. I parked my sedan next to Cassidy's Porsche. The contrast was laughable. My car was practical, dusty from the road, and invisible. Hers was sleek, aggressive, and cost more than my entire college education. I took a breath, centered myself, and walked to the front door. I did not have to knock. The door swung open before my hand even touched the brass handle. My mother stood there. "Nora," she exclaimed. The sound was right. The volume was appropriate for a welcoming mother, but the physical action was all wrong. She pulled me into a hug that felt stiff, like embracing a mannequin. Her hands patted my back twice one, to a signal that the interaction was complete. She pulled back and immediately scanned me from head to toe. Her eyes lingered on my shoes, comfortable loafers, my trousers wrinkled from the drive, and my hair pulled back in a severe bun. She did not say anything critical, but the slight tightening of her lips spoke volumes. I had failed the first inspection. "You must be exhausted," she said, her voice airy. "Come in. We have everything ready." I stepped inside. The foyer was overwhelming. The scent of white lilies was so potent it tasted metallic in the back of my throat. Everywhere I looked, there were flowers, massive arrangements on the console tables, on the staircase landing, in the corners. It looked less like a birthday celebration and more like a wake. "Where is Cassidy?" I asked. "In the dining room," Mother said, turning her back to me to lead the way. "She has been so helpful. Nora, truly, I do not know what I would have done without her these past few months." We entered the dining room, and I stopped cold. The table, which could seat 16 people easily, was set for 3, but it was not set for a cozy family dinner. It was set for a summit. The candles were tall and white, spaced with mathematical precision. The silverware gleamed under the chandelier light with a harsh, surgical brightness. The tablecloth was so starched, it looked like a sheet of white steel. And there was Cassidy. She was standing by the sideboard, pouring wine. She wore a dress that was a shade of red so deep it looked like fresh arterial blood. It was tailored to within an inch of its life. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She just tilted her head, like a predator assessing the nutritional value of a rabbit. "The prodigal daughter returns," Cassidy said. Her voice was smooth, low, and laced with something that sounded like amusement. "Happy birthday, little sister." "Hello, Cassidy," I said, keeping my hands clasped in front of me. The house looked staged. "It is an occasion," Cassidy said, walking over to hand me a glass of wine. I didn't want it, but I took it. Refusing would be seen as an act of aggression. 33? The Jesus year? Let us hope you don't have a martyr complex. "Let's sit," Mother said quickly, clapping her hands together. "Dinner is ready to be served. Mrs. Higgins made your favorite, roast duck." We sat. The distance between us felt vast. I was at one side of the long table. Cassidy was across from me, and Mother sat at the head, in the chair that used to be my father's. That detail stung more than I expected. Veronica Wood did not look like a matriarch. She looked like a child playing dress-up in a giant's chair. The meal began in a silence that was heavy enough to crush bones. The only sounds were the clinking of silver against china and the soft hum of the HVAC system. I watched my mother. She was eating, but it was mechanical. Her eyes kept darting around the room, landing on everything except me. She looked at the centerpiece. She looked at the drapes. She looked at her own hands, and she had a new habit. Her left hand was resting on the stem of her wine glass, and she was spinning it. Twist left, twist right, twist left, twist right. It was a nervous tick, a leak in her perfect hull. Why was she so nervous? She was the director of this play. She should be confident, unless she wasn't the director anymore. I shifted my gaze to Cassidy. Cassidy was eating with gusto. She looked radiant. She looked like she had just fed on something vital. "I was in New York last week," Cassidy announced. Not to me, but to the room in general. "Met with the gallery owners in Chelsea. They are very interested in the collection. I told them we are not ready to liquidate yet, but the valuation they proposed is staggering." I paused, my fork halfway to my mouth. "The collection." "You mean Dad's art collection?" "Our collection," Cassidy corrected, her eyes snapping to mine. "And yes, it is sitting in a warehouse gathering dust. I am exploring options. That is what responsible stewards do. Nora, we maximize assets." "Dad loved those paintings," I said quietly. "He spent 30 years collecting them. He didn't buy them as assets. He bought them because he liked them." "Dad is dead," Cassidy said. She said it without emotion. Just a statement of fact, like commenting on the weather. Sentimental attachment is a luxury we cannot afford if we want to maintain this estate. I asked. I didn't realize we were making decisions yet. I haven't seen the final executing documents. This was the opening. I watched my mother closely. "Speaking of which," I continued, keeping my voice level, "that is why I came back. I assumed since the lawyers are involved, the reading of the will is scheduled. I need to know the timeline for the probate process." The reaction was instantaneous. Mother stopped spinning her glass. Her hand froze. She went completely still, her face draining of the little color it had. She didn't answer me. Instead, her eyes shot desperately to Cassidy. It was a look of pure panic, a look that said, "Help me." I do not know the line. It was the look of a subordinate waiting for orders. Cassidy did not flinch. She took a slow sip of her wine, savoring the moment. She placed the glass down with a deliberate clink. "You are so impatient, Nora," Cassidy said. Her tone was patronizing, like she was explaining quantum physics to a toddler. "Always rushing to the end of the book. The lawyers are handling the complexities. There are nuances." "What kind of nuances?" I pressed. "A will is a legal directive. It is either executed or it is contested. Which is it?" "Everything is under control," Cassidy said, leaning back in her chair. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You do not need to worry your little head about the heavy lifting. We wanted you here for your birthday, to celebrate. The business will happen when it happens." "When?" I asked. Cassidy's smile widened, revealing teeth that looked too white, too sharp. "All in good time, Nora, at the exact right moment. You will know everything." The vague threat hung in the air between us. I looked at my mother again. She had resumed spinning her glass. Faster now. Twist, twist, twist. She looked terrified. And then it clicked. The pieces aligned in my mind with the cold precision of a spreadsheet formula. The clean house, the orchestrated flowers, the nervous mother, the arrogant sister, the refusal to discuss the legalities, and that email, the DNA kit delivered to Cassidy. This was not a birthday dinner. This was not a family reunion. This was a setup. They weren't waiting for the lawyers. They were waiting for me. They needed me here, physically present, for whatever they were planning to do. This whole evening was a stage, and they had placed a mark on the floor where I was supposed to stand so they could drop a piano on my head. Cassidy wasn't just being mean. She was confident. She held a card she hadn't played yet, and she was just waiting for the audience to settle into their seats. My instincts screamed at me to leave. to stand up, grab my bag, and drive back to Wisconsin until the tires melted. But I was a risk analyst. You do not panic in the face of a threat. You assess it. If I left now, I would be leaving blind. I would be giving them the advantage of surprise. If they wanted a show, I would stay, but I would not play the victim. I picked up my wine glass and took a sip. Mimicking Cassidy's motion, I forced my shoulders to relax. I let a small, bland smile touch my lips. "You are right," I said, my voice calm. "I should just relax. It is my birthday, after all." I saw a flicker of confusion in Cassidy's eyes. She had expected me to push, to get emotional, to demand answers. My compliance threw her off her rhythm, just for a second. "Exactly," Cassidy said, though her voice had lost a fraction of its edge. I cut a piece of the duck. It was cold. "So," I said, looking at my mother, "tell me more about the garden. Mother, are the hydrangeas blooming early this year?" I decided then and there I would not ask another question about the will. I would not ask about the money. I would sit here, eat this cold bird, and watch them. I would count every blink, every glance, every micro-expression. I was in the interrogation room, yes, but they forgot that I was the one who analyzed data for a living. They thought they had trapped me. They didn't realize they had just locked themselves in with a witness who was taking notes. The transition from dinner to dessert was abrupt, signaled not by a conversation lull, but by Cassidy snapping her fingers at the kitchen door. The air in the dining room had grown stale, thick with unsaid words and the metallic tang of my own anxiety. I had barely touched the roast duck. It sat on my plate, congealed and gray, a perfect culinary representation of how I felt about being in this house. Mrs. Higgins pushed through the swinging door. She did not look at me. She was a good woman who had worked for us for 20 years, and usually, she would have greeted me with a warm hug and questions about Wisconsin. Tonight, she kept her eyes fixed on the floor tiles. In her hands, she carried a cake. If the dinner had been an attempt at intimidation through grandeur, the cake was a deliberate insult. In the Wood household, birthdays were historically events of patisserie excellence. My mother used to commission multi-tiered confections from a French baker in Boston, works of art involving spun sugar and gold leaf. But the thing Mrs. Higgins placed in the center of the pristine table was a rectangular slab of grocery store sheet cake. The frosting was a garish, chemical blue that clashed violently with the antique china. The plastic lid had clearly just been removed, leaving a smear of icing along the edge. The words, "Happy Birthday," were scrawled in a generic, shaky script. It cost, at most, $15. It was a prop. It was there so they could say they gave me a cake. It was the bare minimum required to maintain the charade of a celebration while signaling exactly how little I mattered. "Make a wish," Cassidy said. Her voice was flat, bored. There were no candles. I looked at the cake, then at my mother. Veronica was studying her napkin as if it contained the secrets of the universe. She knew this was wrong. She knew this was beneath the standards she had enforced for decades. But she said nothing. She was letting Cassidy direct the scene, and her complicity was more painful than the cheap sugar. "I am not hungry," I said, my voice steady. "Thank you. Mrs. Higgins, you can take it away." Mrs. Higgins looked relieved to remove the offensive object. She scurried back into the kitchen, leaving us alone again. The silence that followed was sharp, vibrating with potential energy. "Well," Cassidy said, clapping her hands together once. The sound cracked through the room like a pistol shot. "Since you are too good for cake, perhaps you will appreciate your gift." She reached under the table and produced a box. It was not large. It was wrapped in silver foil paper, the kind that reflects light with a harsh, mirror-like quality. There was no bow, no card, just the silver box, sitting there like a landmine. Cassidy placed it on the table and slid it toward me. The friction of the box against the starch of the tablecloth made a dry, rasping sound. "Go on," Cassidy urged. She leaned forward, her elbows on the table, a breach of etiquette Mother would have normally corrected instantly. Open it. I picked it out myself. I looked at the box. My training in risk analysis screamed at me to not touch it. Every variable in the room had shifted. The atmosphere had gone from passive-aggressive to predatory. Cassidy was practically vibrating with anticipation. Her pupils were dilated. She was not giving me a gift. She was delivering a verdict. "Mother," I said, turning to Veronica, I wanted to see if she would stop this. I wanted to give her one last chance to be a parent. Mother looked up. Her face was pale, the skin tight around her mouth. She looked at the silver box, then at Cassidy, and I saw a flash of genuine fear in her eyes. "Cassidy," she whispered. It was a weak sound. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. "Maybe not now. Maybe later." "Now is the perfect time," Cassidy said, her voice dropping an octave. It was hard and cold. "Nora came all this way for the truth about the estate, about her place in this family. It is time she understood exactly what that place is." She looked at me, her eyes locking onto mine. "Open it, Nora." I reached out. My hand did not shake. I refused to let it shake. I pulled the box closer. The silver paper felt cool under my fingertips. I hooked a finger under the fold and tore it. The sound of ripping paper seemed deafening in the quiet room. I peeled back the foil. Inside was a sleek white cardboard box. The branding was familiar. It matched the logo from the email I had received on the highway. Gen ID. Discover your origins. It was a commercial DNA test kit. I stared at it. For a second, my brain refused to process the implication. I thought it was a joke about health or ancestry, just as I had rationalized in the car. But then I looked up at Cassidy. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her expression was one of pure, unadulterated malice. It was the look of someone who had been sharpening a knife for years and finally got to use it. "I thought you might want to find your real family," Cassidy said, "since you clearly do not belong to this one." The air left my lungs. "What are you talking about?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, distant. Cassidy laughed. It was a short, ugly sound. "Oh, stop acting. Did you really think you were one of us? Look at you. Look at me. Look at Dad's photos. You were never a Wood. Nora, you were just a charity case. Dad felt too guilty to throw out." She leaned in closer, her voice dripping with venom. "You are nothing," she hissed. "You are just another man's mistake." The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Another man's mistake. It wasn't just an insult. It was a dismantling of my entire existence. It was an accusation that stripped away 33 years of identity. I turned slowly to my mother. This was the moment. This was the moment where she stood up. This was where she slammed her hand on the table and told Cassidy to shut her mouth. This was where she told me it was a lie, a cruel, twisted prank by a jealous sister. "Mother," I said. Veronica Wood did not look at me. She squeezed her eyes shut. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. A single tear leaked out from under her eyelid, tracking through her perfect foundation. "Cassidy, please," she whispered again. "It serves no purpose to be cruel." She didn't say it was a lie. She said it served no purpose to be cruel. The world stopped. The buzzing of the lights, the hum of the fridge in the distant kitchen, the beating of my own heart, it all ceased, in the silence of my mother's refusal to defend me. The truth roared. It was true. The reason I never fit in. The reason I was the beige shadow in a Technicolor family. The reason my mother always looked at me with that vague sense of disappointment, while my father looked at me with a fierce, protective sadness. I wasn't Thomas Wood's daughter. I was a secret. I was a scandal that had been dressed up in private school uniforms and hidden in plain sight. Cassidy sat back, looking satisfied. She had detonated the bomb, and now she was watching the debris fall. She expected me to cry. She expected me to scream, to throw the box, to run out of the room sobbing so she could chase me down with legal papers. She wanted a scene. She wanted to break me so completely that I would sign whatever she put in front of me just to escape the shame. But she forgot who I was. I am a risk analyst. When a catastrophic event occurs, You do not panic. You contain the damage. You secure the assets. You survive. I looked at the box. I looked at the plastic-wrapped swab inside. Slowly, deliberately. I put the lid back on the white box. I folded the torn silver paper over it, smoothing the creases with the flat of my hand. I moved with the precision of a surgeon. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor. A harsh sound that made my mother flinch. I picked up the box. I held it under my arm like a file folder. I looked at Cassidy. I didn't give her a tear. I didn't give her a tremble. I gave her nothing but a wall of ice. "Happy birthday to me," I said. My voice was dry. It was devoid of emotion. It was the voice of a stranger. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I heard Cassidy scoff behind me, a sound of disbelief that I hadn't crumbled on cue. I heard my mother sob, a sudden intake of breath, but I didn't look back. I walked across the foyer, past the ridiculous lilies, and climbed the stairs. My legs felt mechanical. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. I reached the second floor and walked down the long hallway to my old bedroom. I opened the door and stepped inside, closing it softly behind me. I turned the lock. Only then did I exhale. I leaned against the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Another man's mistake. The phrase replayed in my mind, looping over and over. I pushed off the door and looked around the room. It was my bedroom, but it wasn't. When I left Baythorn, my room had been a sanctuary of books, old debate trophies, and the cluttered detritus of a quiet teenage life. Now, it looked like a guest room in a boutique hotel. The walls were freshly painted a neutral gray. The carpet was new. My old bookshelf was gone, replaced by a generic art print of a sailboat. It was sterile. It was clean. It was a showroom. They had erased me. I walked over to the closet. I needed to know how deep this erasure went. I opened the double doors. My old clothes were gone, the debate team hoodies, the prom dress I hated, the winter coats all gone. The closet was empty save for a few wooden hangers, but something caught my eye. I reached up to the top shelf. It was high, out of regular eyeline. I was tall, taller than my mother, taller than the cleaning staff. There was a layer of dust on the far back corner of the shelf, but right in the middle of the dust, there was a clean, curved swipe. It was the shape of a drag mark. Someone had pulled something down from this shelf recently, very recently. I stared at the mark. The dust around it was thick, months of accumulation. The swipe was stark and dark. I knew what used to be up there, in the back, behind the winter blankets I used to store. There had been a plastic bin, a junk bin, old report cards, participation ribbons, birthday cards from elementary school. The things that weren't important enough to display, but too sentimental to throw away. The bin was gone. A chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature settled in my stomach. This wasn't just about cleaning out the room. If they were just renovating, they would have cleared the whole shelf, but the dust remained in the corners. Only the specific spot where the bin sat had been disturbed. Someone had come in here looking for it, Cassidy. She hadn't just ordered the DNA test on a hunch. She had gone digging. She had come into my room, rifled through my history, and found something. She had been hunting for ammunition. I looked at the DNA kit on the bed where I had tossed it. She thought this was the end of the story. She thought stripping me of my paternity would strip me of my power. She thought I would crawl away and leave the estate to her. I walked over to the bed and picked up the kit again. If she wanted a DNA test, she would get one. But she wasn't going to control the chain of custody, and she wasn't going to control the narrative. I wasn't a mistake. I was a variable she hadn't accounted for. I took out my phone. My hands were steady now. The shock had passed, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I wasn't the daughter of Thomas Wood by blood fine, but I was the daughter he raised, and I knew how he did business. You never enter a negotiation without leverage. I looked at the empty closet shelf one last time. You took the bin. Cassidy, I thought, you took the history, but you forgot that I lived it. I turned away from the sterile room. I wasn't going to sleep. I had work to do. The silence in the house was absolute, the kind of heavy, suffocating quiet that only exists in large mansions filled with secrets. It was 2 a.m. I had not slept. I was still dressed in my dinner clothes, though I had kicked off my loafers. I stood in the hallway, listening. My mother and sister were asleep in their respective wings, secure in their victory. They thought I was in my room, crying over a genetic testing kit. They thought I was broken. They were wrong. I was working. I knew Cassidy. She was efficient, but she was also arrogant. She would not have thrown my childhood things in the trash immediately. She would have moved them to a staging area, a purgatory for objects she deemed irrelevant, but hadn't yet authorized for the dumpster. In our house, that was the linen closet at the end of the East Hall, a massive cedar-lined walk-in that smelled of lavender and mothballs. I moved down the hallway, stepping on the edges of the runner where the floorboards were less likely to creak. I reached the closet door and turned the handle. It was unlocked. Inside, stacked haphazardly on the floor beneath rows of Egyptian cotton sheets, were 3 plastic bins. They were the translucent kind, the ones I had used to store my life before I left for college. I knelt. I did not turn on the overhead light. The ambient glow from the hallway sconces was enough. I needed to see what she had kept, and more importantly, what she had planted. I opened the first bin. It was filled with papers, old report cards, debate team certificates, art projects from elementary school that were mediocre at best. I flipped through a photo album that had been tossed on top. I analyzed the images with professional detachment. Here was the Wood family vacation in Martha's Vineyard. 1998. There was Mother, perfect in white linen. There was Dad, looking stoic. There was Cassidy, front and center, holding a starfish, smiling directly at the lens. And there I was. I was always on the periphery. In almost every single photograph, I was physically distanced from the core unit. I was standing a few inches too far to the left, or half obscured by a shadow, or looking away from the camera. It was a pattern of exclusion that had been documented for decades, a visual data set proving I had been an outlier long before tonight's revelation. I moved to the second bin. This one was unlabeled. It looked like a catch-all, a dumping ground for loose items swept from shelves. I dug through it carefully, lifting layers of old yearbooks and trophies. My hand brushed against something at the very bottom. It was an envelope. It stood out immediately. The paper of the envelope was bright white, crisp, and clean. Everything else in the bin was yellowed with age, smelling of dust and time. This envelope was new. It had not been sitting there for 10 years. It had been placed there. It was a breadcrumb. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, calculating the probability of a trap. But if Cassidy wanted me to find this, I needed to know what the narrative was. I picked it up. It was unsealed. I slid the contents out. It was a photograph, an actual physical print, not a digital copy. It was old. The colors faded to that nostalgic 70s orange tint. It showed my mother. She was much younger, her hair looser, her smile less practiced. She was sitting on a park bench, holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. That baby was me. I knew the blanket. I still had a shred of it somewhere, but the man sitting next to her was not Thomas Wood. He was tall, with dark curly hair and a jawline that looked terrifyingly familiar when I touched my own face. He had his arm around the back of the bench, leaning in toward my mother with an intimacy that made my stomach turn. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at her, and she was looking at him with an expression I had never seen her direct at my father, reckless, terrifying adoration. I flipped the photo over. On the back, in my mother's unmistakable, elegant cursive, were 2 words. Forgive me. I stared at the writing. The ink was blue. It wasn't fresh, but it wasn't decades old either. It looked like it had been written maybe a few years ago. Perhaps when she was going through old boxes, or perhaps when the guilt became too much to carry in silence. I set the photo down on the floor. I did not cry. I engaged the audit protocol. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I took a high-resolution photo of the front of the picture, then the back. Then I took a wide shot of the bin, capturing the position of the envelope relative to the other items. I zoomed in on the dust patterns inside the bin. There was a disturbance in the dust layer around the envelope, a clear smudge where a finger had pressed it down to ensure it sat flat. This was a plant. Cassidy had raided my room, found the bin, perhaps found this photo elsewhere in the house, maybe in Dad's private safe, or Mom's jewelry box, and seated it here for me to find. She wanted me to go looking for answers. She wanted me to find the visual proof that I was a bastard child, so that the DNA test would just be the final nail in the coffin. I picked up the DNA kit I had brought with me from the bedroom. I held it in one hand and the photo in the other. The strategy was becoming clear. Cassidy didn't just want me out of the will. She wanted me to self-destruct. She wanted me to take the test, see the results, feel the shame of being another man's mistake, and run away. She wanted me to be so humiliated that I wouldn't fight for the assets. She expected me to use the kit she provided, register it with my email, and probably share the results with the family account because I was desperate for connection. She wanted to control the data. I put the photo back in the envelope. I placed the envelope back at the bottom of the bin, exactly where I found it. I adjusted the yearbooks on top to match the angle in my reference photo. I smoothed the carpet fibers where I had kneeled. I was not going to play her game. I was going to build my own board. I went back to my room, locking the door behind me. I sat at the small desk and opened my laptop, connecting to the internet via a personal hotspot, not the house Wi-Fi. I wasn't going to let their router log my traffic. I began to type a list of protocols. First, the kit. I could not use the one Cassidy gave me. It was compromised. She likely had the serial number recorded. If I sent it in, she might have a way to access the results. Or worse, she could have tampered with the registration. I would keep her kit as a decoy. I would take it with me, pretending I was going to use it. But I would buy a new one, a different brand. Second, the identity. I would not use the name Nora Wood. I would not use my address in Madison. I opened a browser window and set up a new email account. NW, audit, protocol at unsecured mail provider. I generated a password that was 20 characters long. I looked up the locations of private mailboxes in a town 3 hours south of Madison, across the state line in Illinois. I would drive there next week. I would rent a box using cash. Third, the payment. I could not use my credit card. The transaction would appear on my bank statement, and while Cassidy didn't have access to my accounts, I was done taking chances with digital footprints. I would buy a prepaid Visa card at a grocery store in a town I never visited. Using cash, I withdrew from an ATM inside a casino where the volume of transactions was high. I would execute the test. I would send it from a post office in a third state. I looked at the DNA kit on the bed. It was no longer a weapon against me. It was just a biological sample collection unit. I slept for 2 hours, a dreamless, shallow nap. When I woke, the sun was just beginning to bleach the sky a pale, sickly gray. I packed my bag with military precision. The clothes were folded tight. The DNA kit was buried in the center of my laundry bag, wrapped in a sweater. I checked the room. I wiped the desk where my laptop had sat. I smoothed the bedspread. I made it look as if I had barely been there. I walked downstairs. The house was waking up. I could hear the distant clatter of Mrs. Higgins in the kitchen. I reached the foyer and saw Cassidy. She was standing by the front door, leaning against the frame, holding a mug of steaming coffee. She looked fresh, rested, and utterly triumphant. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my first car. "Leaving so soon?" she asked. Her voice was light, teasing. "You haven't even had breakfast." "I have to get back," I said. My voice was raspy, and I didn't clear it. I let her hear the exhaustion. It was part of the camouflage. Work, deadlines. Cassidy took a sip of her coffee, her eyes dancing over my face. She was looking for puffy eyes. She was looking for the red blotches of crying. I gave her a stoic, tired mask. "Did you pack everything?" she asked, her eyes dipping to my bag. She wasn't asking about clothes. She was asking about the kit, and maybe the photo. She wanted to know if the bait had been taken. "Yes," I said. "I have everything I need." A slow smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a cat that has just watched the mouse run into the maze. "Good," she said. "Drive safe. Nora, it is a long way back to wherever it is you really belong." "Goodbye, Cassidy," I said. I walked out the door. The morning air was cold and smelled of salt. I walked to my car, threw my bag in the passenger seat, and got in. I started the engine. As I reversed out of the driveway, I looked up at the rearview mirror. Cassidy was still standing in the doorway. She raised her coffee mug and a mock toast. She looked like she had already won the war. She thought I was fleeing in shame, carrying the burden of my illegitimacy back to Wisconsin to hide. She didn't know that I had photographed the evidence. She didn't know I had seen the "forgive me" note. She didn't know that I wasn't running away. I was regrouping. I shifted the car into drive and pressed the gas. I didn't look back at the house. The Baythorn estate was just a location now, a crime scene, and I was the lead investigator. As I hit the highway, merging into the traffic that flowed away from the coast, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't grief. It wasn't fear. It was the cold, hard hum of an engine coming online. "You want a DNA test, Cassidy," I said aloud to the empty car. "I'll give you a DNA test. But first, I had to find out who the man in the photo was, and I had a feeling that the answer was going to cost someone a lot more than a $15 cake. The waiting period was a specific kind of torture, a slow drip erosion of my sanity that no amount of risk analysis could quantify. For 3 weeks, I went to work at North Pine Metrics. I sat at my dual monitor station. I built actuarial models for flood insurance in the Midwest. I nodded at colleagues in the break room and made appropriate noises about the weather. But I was not really there. My body was a shell in a swivel chair, while my mind was entirely focused on a biological sample currently being processed in a lab in Arizona. Every time my phone vibrated, my pulse spiked. I developed a Pavlovian response to the notification chime. Was it the email? Was it the verdict? I checked the status portal of the genetic testing company 5, maybe 6 times an hour. Sample received. DNA extraction. Analysis in progress. The progress bar moved with agonizing slowness, a digital hourglass measuring the remaining minutes of my life as Nora Wood. I kept the photo of my mother and the mystery man hidden in a safety deposit box at a bank across town. I did not trust my apartment. I did not trust my car. Cassidy had proven she could breach my childhood bedroom. I had to assume she had the resources to breach my current life if she felt threatened enough. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, the email arrived. I was in the middle of a meeting about quarterly projections. The notification slid silently onto the lock screen of my phone, which was face up on the conference table. "Your results are ready." The room went silent. The voice of the department head turned into a distant, underwater hum. I felt the blood drain from my face, rushing to my feet. I stood up. I did not excuse myself. I simply walked out of the conference room, leaving my laptop and notebook behind. I walked straight to the bathroom, locked myself in the handicap stall, and sat on the closed lid of the toilet. My hands were shaking so badly I had to type my password 3 times. I logged in. The dashboard loaded. A colorful pie chart filled the screen. I didn't look at the ethnicity percentages. I scrolled down. I went straight to the section labeled Paternal Lineage and DNA Matches. I had spent years looking at the Wood family tree. I knew the surnames: Wood, Sterling, Halloway, Old English names, Mayflower names. There was not a single one of them on my screen. The list of matches was populated by strangers, second cousins, third cousins, and right at the top, a predicted first cousin or half-sibling with a surname I had never heard in my life. Vale. Highest match potential first cousin. Surname Vale. I sat there, staring at the 4 letters. Vale. It was a sharp, simple name. It sounded nothing like Wood. It lacked the pretension. I clicked on the profile. The user had no photo, just a generic avatar, but the connection was undeniable. We shared 18% of our DNA. The confirmation hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Cassidy was right. The photo was real. Thomas Wood was not my father. I was a fraud. I was, as she had so eloquently put it, a mistake. But then, the analyst in me took over. The grief tried to rise, but I shoved it down. I needed data. I needed to cross-reference this variable. Veil. Where had I seen that name? Or rather, where had I seen people who didn't fit the Wood aesthetic? I closed the browser and opened my photo gallery. I scrolled back 4 months to the funeral. I had taken hundreds of photos that day, mostly out of a need to keep my hands busy. I scrolled past the pictures of the flowers, the hearse, the endless line of black cars. I was looking for the crowd shots at the graveside. I found one. It was a wide-angle shot taken from behind the family seating area. There, standing at the very back, near the cemetery gates, was a small cluster of people. They were separated from the main group of mourners by a good 20 feet of grass. They weren't dressed in the high-end, tailored wool coats that the Wood associates wore. Their clothes were cheaper, ill-fitting, a man in a brown suit, a woman in a navy dress that was too tight. I zoomed in. My mother was in the frame, her head turned slightly. She wasn't looking at the coffin. She was looking at them, even in the grainy resolution of the zoomed-in photo. I could see the tension in her neck. Her hand was gripping her purse strap so hard the leather was warping. She was terrified of them. I looked at the man in the brown suit. He had dark, curly hair. He looked older, tired, but the structure of his jaw was familiar. It was the same jaw I saw in the mirror every morning. It was the same jaw as the man in the photo I found in the bin. These were the Veils. They had come to the funeral. They had stood at the back, silent and unacknowledged, watching the man who raised their blood relative be buried. Rage, cold and sharp, flooded my system. My mother and sister had known. They had known who these people were. They had watched me grieve a father who wasn't mine, while my biological family stood 50 yards away, treated like lepers. I was done hiding. I was done being the polite, risk-averse sister. I took a screenshot of my DNA results, cropping it so the name Veil was front and center, along with the zero-match indicator for the Wood lineage. I opened the family group chat. It was a dormant digital space, unused since Dad died. The participants were just 3, me, Mother, and Cassidy. I attached the screenshot. I typed 3 words. Can someone explain? I hit send. The message bubble turned blue. Delivered. I watched the screen. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A frantic drumbeat in the quiet bathroom stall. 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Read by Mother. Read by Cassidy. My phone instantly lit up with an incoming call. The name on the screen was Mother. I didn't answer. I let it ring. I watched the phone vibrate on my knee, dancing slightly with the force of her panic. It stopped. Then it started again immediately. I declined the call. A text message appeared from her. Mother Nora. Please, pick up the phone. Mother, delete that image. Right now. This is not the place. Mother, please. I am begging you. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't asking what it meant. She was begging me to hide the evidence. She was terrified that the digital footprint would somehow leak, that her carefully curated narrative would be stained by the truth. Then, a new bubble appeared. This one was gray. Cassidy. She didn't call. She didn't beg. She sent a single, short message. Cassidy, well, now you know. I stared at the screen. The callousness of it took my breath away. Now you know. No apology, no explanation. Just a smug acknowledgement that she had successfully detonated my life. My thumb hovered over the screen. This was it. This was the admission. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't confused. She knew. She had known all along, and she had waited until my birthday to weaponize it. I pressed the volume up and power buttons simultaneously. Click. I took a screenshot of the chat. I captured the DNA result. My question. Mother's panic, and Cassidy's cold confirmation. I saved the image to my photos. Then I saved it to my cloud drive. Then I emailed it to my new, secure account. I was about to stand up when a new notification banner dropped down from the top of my screen. It wasn't a text. It was a security alert from Google. Critical security alert. Unusual sign-in attempt detected. Location Baythorn, Massachusetts. The blood in my veins turned to ice. Cassidy. She had the passwords. She had always had access to my old recovery email, the one we set up when I was in high school. She was trying to get into my accounts. She wanted to delete the screenshot. She wanted to scrub the chat history. She was trying to sanitize the record before I could use it. I didn't panic. I reacted. I tapped the alert. Review activity. Device iPhone 15 Pro Max. Location Baythorn. No, you don't, I whispered. I hit. This was not me. I immediately navigated to the security settings. Change password. I typed in a new string of characters. Random and complex. Sign out of all other devices. I hit confirm. I went to my social media. Two-factor authentication. I enabled it on everything. My bank, my email, my cloud storage. My phone pinged again. A text from Cassidy. Cassidy. You are making a mistake. Nora, don't lock us out. We need to talk about this rationally. She had been kicked out. The session had expired mid-intrusion. I didn't reply. I blocked her number. Then I blocked Mother's number. I walked out of the bathroom stall. I washed my hands. Looking at myself in the mirror, I looked the same, but I was different. I was no longer the confused victim. I was a woman under siege. I walked back to the conference room, packed up my laptop, and told my boss I had a family emergency. It wasn't a lie. The emergency was that my family was trying to destroy me. I drove home, but I didn't go inside. I sat in my car in the parking lot and searched for one thing on my phone. Best Estate Litigation Attorney, Chicago. I needed someone outside of the Baythorn bubble. I needed someone who didn't care about the Wood family reputation. I needed a shark who smelled blood in the water. I found a name, Reese Halbrook. The reviews were polarizing. Half of them called her a genius. The other half called her a ruthless nightmare. That was exactly what I wanted. I called her office. Halbrook Law, a receptionist answered. My name is Nora Wood, I said. I am the daughter of Thomas Wood. I have a genetic test, a screenshot of an admission of fraud, and an estate worth millions that my sister is trying to steal. I need an appointment today. There was a brief pause. Can you be here in an hour? I drove to Chicago. The office was on the 45th floor of a glass tower that overlooked the lake. It was not warm. It was not welcoming. It was steel and chrome and intimidating as hell. Reese Halbrook was waiting for me. She was a woman in her 50s with short, silver hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses that looked like they cost more than my rent. She didn't offer me coffee. She pointed to a chair. Talk, she said. Facts only. No tears. I laid it out. I put the phone on the desk. I showed her the email from the courier service. I showed her the photo of the forgive me note. I showed her the DNA results. And finally, I showed her the screenshot of the group chat. Reese looked at the screenshot for a long time. She zoomed in on Cassidy's message. Oh. Now you know. She looked at the timestamp of the login attempt from Baythorn. She took off her glasses and cleaned them slowly with a microfiber cloth. The silence in the room was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive. It was the silence of a general reviewing a battle map. You think this is about them hating you, Reese said. Her voice was low, gravelly. They do hate me, I said. Irrelevant, Reese snapped. She put her glasses back on. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and completely devoid of sympathy. Hate is an emotion. This is not emotional. This is transactional. She tapped the printout of the login attempt. Your sister didn't just want to hurt your feelings. Nora, if she just wanted to hurt you, she would have left it at the dinner table. But she tried to access your accounts. She tried to destroy the record of her knowledge. Reese leaned forward, clasping her hands on the desk. She ordered the kit to arrive on a specific date. She staged the reveal. She waited for you to react, and when you didn't react the way she wanted, she confirmed it in writing. Why? I asked. Why go through all this trouble? Reese smiled. It was a terrifying expression. Because of the timeline, Reese said. Your father died 4 months ago. The will hasn't been executed. Why? Because there is likely a contest period. Cassidy isn't just being mean. She is trying to get you to disinherit yourself. Reese stood up and walked to the window. looking out at the city. If you are not a biological Wood, Cassidy can petition the court to have you removed from the trust, but that is messy. It takes years. It airs dirty laundry. But if you walk away, if you sign a settlement because you are ashamed, if you act irrationally and give them grounds to claim you are unstable. She turned back to me. She gave you the DNA test because she wanted you to run. She wanted you to feel like a fraud so you wouldn't look at the paperwork. Reese walked back to the desk and placed her hand on my phone. She made a mistake, though. What mistake? I asked. She got arrogant, Reese said. She confirmed she knew, and by trying to hack you, she showed intent to suppress evidence. Reese sat down and opened a fresh legal pad. She picked up a pen. This isn't a family squabble. Nora, this is a strategy, a hostile takeover, and you just hired the best defense in the city. She looked at me, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Not the warm, fuzzy hope of a happy ending, but the cold, hard hope of retribution. We are going to audit them, Reese said. We are going to audit every penny, every email, every movement your sister made while your father was dying, and we are going to find out exactly why she is so desperate to get rid of you. I nodded. Let's get to work, I said. Reese Halbrook did not treat my story like a tragedy. She treated it like a tangled ball of wire that needed to be straightened out with pliers. Her office was no longer a place of consultation. It had become a war room. The view of the Chicago skyline was ignored. All attention was focused on the massive whiteboard that covered the west wall. Stop, Reese commanded, holding up a marker. You are using emotional language again. Nora, I do not care that your mother looked guilty at the funeral. Guilt is not a metric I can present to a judge. I need behavior. I need timestamps. I need verifiable actions. I took a deep breath, forcing the lump in my throat to dissolve. She was standing apart from the veils. She was gripping her purse. She looked at them, then she looked away. Better, Reese said, uncapping the marker. She wrote funeral visual acknowledgement of biological relations. Next, the DNA kit. Tell me the sequence again, not how it felt, just the mechanics. It was delivered to Cassidy. It was pre-purchased. She handed it to me at the dinner table. She stated, and I quote, "Another man's mistake." Reese wrote verbal assault, public humiliation on the board. She circled it twice. The marker squeaked sharply against the whiteboard, a sound that felt like a scalpel cutting through skin. Here is the play, Reese said, turning to face me. She looked like a general explaining a flanking maneuver. Cassidy knows that biology alone does not automatically invalidate a will, especially if your father raised you as his own. The law recognizes equitable adoption and established parental relationships. Simply proving you are not a Wood by blood is not enough to strip you of your inheritance. Then why do it? I asked. Why the theatrics psychological warfare? Reese replied. She is building a case for undue influence or fraud. If she can prove you knew you were illegitimate and hid it from your father to secure assets, that is fraud. If she can prove your father was senile and she was the only one protecting the true bloodline, she positions herself as the guardian of the estate. Reese walked over to the table and poured herself a glass of water. But the real goal is simpler, she continued. She wants you to quit. She wants to create a cloud of shame so dense that you sign a settlement just to make it go away. She is banking on you being the quiet, risk-averse sister who hates conflict. She thinks if she waves a DNA test in your face, you will run back to Wisconsin and leave the keys on the table. I looked at the whiteboard. The timeline Reese was building was stark. October, father dies. November, Cassidy moves into the main house. December, limited communication. January, the birthday dinner. I am not running, I said. Good, Reese said. Now, we need to populate this timeline with more than just your memories. We need witnesses. You said your father was sick for 6 months before he died. Who was there? My mother? The nurses? Mrs. Higgins? Who else? Reese pressed. Who saw the dynamic between Cassidy and your father when the lawyers weren't around? I thought back. The memories of those months were blurry for me because I had been in Madison, managing my guilt over not being there enough. But I knew the ecosystem of Baythorn. The neighbors, I said. Mrs. Gable. She lives next door. She is a nosy woman, but she loved my dad. Call her, Reese said. She pointed to the speakerphone on the desk. Right now. What do I say? You are checking in. You are the grieving daughter. You let her talk. Gossip is the best form of intelligence gathering. I dialed the number. My hands were sweating. The line rang 3 times before a breathless voice answered. Hello? Mrs. Gable. It is Nora Wood. Oh, Nora. Her voice pitched up. My goodness. I was just thinking about you. I saw your car at the house last weekend. You didn't stop by. I know. I am so sorry, I said, channeling the polite daughter persona. It was a very intense visit. I am actually calling because I'm trying to put together a scrapbook for Dad. I was wondering if you saw much of him in those last few months. I feel like I missed so much being in Wisconsin. Oh, honey, Mrs. Gable sighed. It was hard. He declined so fast. We didn't see him walking the grounds much after July. Did he have many visitors? I asked. Just Cassidy. Mrs. Gable said, That girl, I have to give it to her. She was devoted. Her car was there every single morning. I used to tell my husband, Look, Cassidy is back again. She was always carrying those big leather folders, always rushing in and out. I looked at Reese. She was writing furiously. Cassidy frequent access. Carrying documents. She was helping him with the business, I suggested. I suppose, Mrs. Gable said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Though I did see them on the porch once. About a month before he passed, your father looked upset. He was shouting. I couldn't hear the words, but he threw a pen down on the table. Cassidy just sat there, cool as a cucumber, pushing the papers back toward him. She didn't leave until he picked the pen up again. Reese's eyes widened. She slashed a check mark on the whiteboard. That sounds stressful, I said, keeping my voice even. Thank you, Mrs. Gable. That helps me understand what he was going through. I hung up. Coercion, Reese said. We have a witness placing Cassidy at the scene, forcing documents on a dying man. Who else? Arthur Penhaligon, I said. He was Dad's business partner for 20 years. They owned the shipping logistics firm together. Call him. Arthur was harder to reach, but his secretary put me through when I mentioned it was urgent family business. Nora. Arthur's voice was gruff, warm. How are you holding up? I am managing. Arthur. I am actually going through some of Dad's old correspondence, and I found something confusing. I was hoping you could clarify. Shoot. Did Dad mention making any major transfers of authority last August? I see some notes here about the operating capital, but I can't find the authorization. There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence. That is funny you ask, Arthur said slowly. I had a strange conversation with Thomas around that time. We had a liquidity transfer of $200,000 scheduled for the fleet maintenance. Standard stuff. I sent the papers over. The next day, Cassidy brought them back. Signed, but a week later, I had lunch with Thomas, and I thanked him for expediting it. He looked at me like I was speaking Greek. My heart skipped a beat. He didn't remember signing it. He said, Arthur, I haven't seen those papers yet. I told him Cassidy brought them in. He got quiet. He rubbed his temples. He was doing that a lot near the end and said, I must have forgotten. The medication makes me foggy. But Nora, your father had a mind like a steel trap. Even on the meds. It bothered me. Did you keep the document? Reese whispered to me, mouthing the words. Do you still have that transfer order? Arthur? I asked. Of course. Corporate records. Can you send me a copy for the scrapbook for the archive? I will have my assistant scan it today. I ended the call. Reese looked at the whiteboard. She drew a line connecting Cassidy with papers to Thomas for getting signature. This is the crack in the dam, Reese said. If your father claimed he didn't sign it, and Cassidy delivered it, we have two possibilities. 1. He was mentally incompetent, which invalidates everything he signed in that period. 2. The signature is a forgery. Cassidy wouldn't forge a signature, I said, though as I said it, I realized I didn't know that for sure. She is too smart. She knows that is a felony. Smart people do stupid things when they think no one is watching, Reese said. We will get a handwriting expert to compare that scan against his previous signatures. If there is even a tremor of difference, we use it. We spent the next 2 hours building the indictment. I called the old housekeeper who had been let go a month before Dad died. She confirmed that Cassidy had ordered her to stay out of the study whenever she was there. I called the nurse agency. They confirmed that Cassidy had requested to be the primary point of contact, bypassing my mother. It was a pattern. Isolation. Control. Pressure. Then, my computer pinged. I looked at the screen. It was an email to my old address, the one I had secured, but which was still listed in the family directories. The sender was Wainwright Locke. Subject verification of domicile. Nora Wood. I reached for the keyboard. It is the law firm from New York, the one Cassidy hired. They are asking me to confirm my current mailing address. Don't touch it, Reese barked. I froze. Reese walked around the desk and looked at the screen. She didn't touch the mouse. She just read the header. Grant Wainwright, she muttered. I know him. He is expensive. He is a closer. Why can't I reply? They just want to know where to send mail. No, Reese said, her eyes narrowing. They know where you live. You have been an employee at North Pine Metrics for 5 years. Your address is public record. This email isn't about finding you. It is a trap. I don't understand. They are measuring the approach, Reese explained. If you reply, you confirm 2 things. 1, that you are receiving communication. 2, that you are compliant. They are likely preparing to serve you with a lawsuit, probably a petition to contest your status as an heir. If you reply to this, they might try to trick you into accepting service by email, or use your reply to establish jurisdiction in a court favorable to them. Do not answer. She turned back to her desk. They are moving faster than I thought. They must know you didn't buy the shame routine. They are prepping the nuclear option. The phone on Reese's desk rang. Not the internal line, but her private cell phone. She looked at the caller ID and frowned. I don't know this number, she said. She picked it up. This is Reese Halbrook. She listened. Her expression shifted from annoyance to intense curiosity. She held up a hand to silence me, though I hadn't said a word. Yes, she is my client, Reese said into the phone. I am representing her in all matters regarding the Wood estate. She listened again. Her eyebrows shot up. Verification? Reese asked. What kind of verification? She grabbed a pen and wrote a name on her notepad. Miles Ardent. I recognized the name. Miles Ardent was a private investigator my father had used for years. He was a ghost. He handled corporate espionage, background checks on competitors, the kind of dirty work that kept the shipping business clean. I hadn't seen him since I was a child. Reese listened for a long time, her eyes fixed on me. Finally, she spoke. The condition has been met, Reese said. My client was publicly humiliated regarding her paternity. She was presented with a DNA kit by her sister. The phrase, another man's mistake, was used. Silence on the other end. Yes, Reese said. We have evidence. We have a digital admission. She paused. I understand. We will expect the package. Reese hung up the phone. She set it down on the desk with a slow, deliberate motion, as if the device had suddenly become heavy. Who was that? I asked. Miles Ardent, Reese said. Your father's private eye. What did he want? He has been holding a file, Reese said. Apparently, your father gave him very specific instructions 18 months ago. He gave Miles a package of documents with a strict conditional release clause. What was the condition? Reese looked at me, and for the first time, her professional mask slipped. She looked impressed. Miles was instructed to release the documents only if, and when, A member of the Wood family used your bloodline to attempt to humiliate you or exclude you from the family. My breath caught in my throat. Dad knew. He didn't just know about the affair. He knew Cassidy. He knew exactly what she would do. He had predicted this moment, the dinner, the box, the insult down to the letter. So, Reese said, a shark-like grin spreading across her face. Cassidy didn't just insult you. She triggered a dead man's switch. What is in the package? I asked. Miles didn't say, Reese replied. But he said he is bringing it to Chicago personally. And he said that once we open it, the question of whether you are a Wood won't matter anymore, because Cassidy might not be one either, at least. Not in the way she thinks. Reese walked over to the whiteboard. She erased the question mark next to strategy. You were right to come to me, Nora, she said. Your father wasn't just a shipping magnate, he was a chess player, and it looks like he just made his move from the grave. I looked at the empty chair where Reese had been sitting. I felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of warmth. In the cold, corporate office, amidst the talk of fraud and lawsuits, I felt him, my dad. He hadn't left me defenseless. He had packed a backpack for me, just like he used to when I went to camp, only this time, he packed it with secrets. When does Miles get here? I asked. Tomorrow morning, Reese said. Get some sleep. Nora, we have a deposition to prepare for, and tomorrow, we get the ammunition. The war for the Wood estate did not stay contained within the high-rise offices of Chicago lawyers or the pristine dining rooms of Baythorn. It bled out. It seeped into the cracks of my real life, staining the one thing I had fought so hard to keep sterile, my privacy. It started at 3 a.m. on a Thursday. I was back in Madison, having returned to pack a bag for an indefinite stay in Chicago. My apartment, usually a fortress of silence, felt permeable. My phone, charging on the nightstand, buzzed against the wood. It was a harsh, aggressive sound in the stillness. I rolled over, my heart instantly hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The screen glowed with a number I did not recognize. No caller ID, just a string of digits from a New York area code. I answered it. I didn't say hello. I just held the phone to my ear and listened. There was no voice. There was no background noise of traffic or television. There was only the sound of breathing. It was slow, deliberate, and wet. It was the sound of someone holding the receiver very close to their mouth, waiting for me to speak, waiting for me to break. Who is this? I whispered. The breathing hitched, then continued, in, out, in, out. It was a rhythmic intimidation. I hung up and blocked the number. My hands were shaking. 10 minutes later, a text message arrived from a different number. It was short, stripped of punctuation, and terrifyingly direct. Do not come to New York. I stared at the glowing letters until they blurred. They knew. They knew Reese was preparing a countermove. They knew I wasn't just sulking in Wisconsin. This wasn't just legal posturing anymore. This was stalking. I sat up in bed, pulling the duvet around my shoulders, and realized that the locks on my door were just metal tumblers. They wouldn't stop the kind of money Cassidy had access to. The next morning, the battlefield shifted to the one place I thought was untouchable, my job. I walked into North Pine Metrics at 8:30. I was tired, my eyes gritty from lack of sleep, but I was ready to bury myself in spreadsheets. I needed the logic of numbers to counteract the chaos of my family. I hadn't even reached my desk when the HR director, a woman named Sarah, who had always been kind to me, intercepted me. Nora, she said. She didn't smile. She held a file folder against her chest like a shield. Can we speak in my office now? The walk to her office felt like a walk to the gallows. I sat in the chair opposite her desk. The blinds were drawn. We received a call this morning, Sarah said. She looked uncomfortable, shifting in her seat. It was a background verification inquiry, very aggressive. I didn't apply for any loans or new jobs, I said, my voice steady despite the nausea rising in my stomach. They claimed to be investigating a fraud report, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They asked if North Pine was aware of character issues regarding your identity. They asked if you had access to sensitive client financial data. They specifically used the phrase, history of deception. I felt the blood drain from my face. Cassidy. She wasn't just trying to cut me out of the will. She was trying to unemploy me. She knew that as a risk analyst, my reputation was my currency. If I was flagged as a fraud risk, I was unemployable in the entire industry. Sarah, I said, looking her dead in the eye. My father passed away recently. There's a dispute over the estate. My sister is grieving, and she is lashing out. This is a personal family matter that is bleeding into my professional life. There is no fraud. There is no deception. Sarah looked at me for a long time. She knew my work. She knew I was the person who stayed late to double-check decimal points. I told them we do not comment on personnel matters, Sarah said softly. But Nora, if they file a formal complaint or a police report, I have to report it to legal, corporate policy. I understand, I said. It won't get to that. I left her office with my knees trembling. I went straight to my desk, packed my personal items into my bag, my favorite stapler, a framed photo of a landscape, my spare cardigan, and walked out. I couldn't risk being fired. I had to take a leave of absence before they found a reason to suspend me. Cassidy had breached the perimeter. I called Reese from my car. She called my job, I said. She is trying to get me fired. Documentation. Reese's voice was sharp, cutting through my panic. Did you get the name of the caller? No. Sarah just said it was a verification check. It wasn't a verification check, Reese said. It was a smear campaign. Write it down. Time, date, content of the conversation with HR. Add it to the timeline. This is harassment. Reese, she is destroying my life. She is trying to provoke a reaction, Reese said. She wants you to call her screaming. She wants you to send a threatening text so she can show it to a judge and say, "Look, she is unstable. Do not give it to her. You are a statue. Nora, you are made of stone." I don't feel like stone, I admitted. I feel like I'm being hunted. You are, Reese said, but the hunter just stepped into a bear trap. She just doesn't know it yet. Get to Chicago. Now. When I arrived at Reese's office 3 hours later, there was a courier envelope on her desk. It was thick and heavy. Open it, Reese said. I tore the tab. It was a cease and desist letter. The letterhead was from Wainwright Locke. I read the opening paragraph. The legal jargon was dense, but the accusation was clear. It accused me of defamation of character against Cassidy Wood. It claimed I was knowingly perpetuating a falsehood regarding lineage to extort funds from the Wood Family Trust. It demanded I surrender all copies of any illegally obtained correspondence, referring to the screenshot of the group chat, and cease all contact with family associates. They are accusing me of extortion, I asked, incredulous, for asking a question about my own father. They are trying to flip the narrative. Reese explained, they are painting you as the con artist. If you go to court claiming rights, they will argue you are doing it with unclean hands. Reese pulled a file from her drawer and slid it across the desk. But this, she said, tapping the folder, is the real weapon. I opened it. It was a copy of a court filing. Emergency petition to restrict access and freeze assets. She filed it this morning, Reese said. She is asking for an emergency injunction to prevent you from accessing any estate accounts, entering any estate properties, or acting as a trustee. And look at the grounds. I scanned the document. It was brutal. Petitioner asserts that Nora Wood has no biological relation to the decedent, Thomas Wood, and her continued involvement poses an immediate risk to the integrity of the estate assets. She is leading with the blood, Reese said. She is betting that a judge will look at the DNA test and grant a temporary order just to be safe. It is a first impression strike. She wants the first thing the court hears to be that you are a stranger. Will it work? I asked. It might have, Reese said. If we didn't have Miles. My phone chimed. I looked down. It was my mother. Mother. Don't go to New York. Nora, please, just stay away. They are going to hurt you. I can't stop her. I stared at the message. I can't stop her. My mother, the woman who could organize a 300-person gala without breaking a sweat, was claiming helplessness. Is she warning me? I asked Reese, showing her the phone. Or is she threatening me? Reese read the text. She is scared. Veronica Wood has spent her entire life curating a perfect image. Cassidy is about to blow that up to get to you. Your mother is collateral damage, and she knows it. She says, "Don't go to New York," I said. The text last night said the same thing. That is because New York is where the kill floor is, Reese said. Wainwright Locke is headquartered there. The main trust accounts are managed there. They want to hold the hearing on their turf. Reese's computer dinged. She turned to the screen, and her posture stiffened. She sat up straighter, her eyes narrowing as she read. "It is time," she said. "What is it?" "An email from Miles Ardent," Reese said. "He says the condition is 99% complete. He is in the lobby. He has the package. He is here. He wanted to deliver it personally, but he also sent a digital key." Reese looked at me. "But before we look at that, check your email, the one you use for the lawyers." I opened my laptop. There was a new email in my inbox, timestamped 2 minutes ago, from Grant Wainwright. Subject urgent. Trustee meeting. Wood Estate. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I clicked it open. Ms. Wood, in light of recent filings and the complex nature of the asset distribution, the executors request an immediate emergency meeting at our offices in Manhattan on Friday at 9 in the morning. Failure to appear will be interpreted as an abdication of trustee duties. This meeting is about Nora. This meeting is about Nora, I read aloud. That is an odd way to phrase it. It is a summons, Reese said. They are inviting you to your own execution. They want you in a room, surrounded by high-priced suits, so they can slide a settlement check across the table and bully you into taking it. They think you will be alone. They think you will be scared. Reese stood up and walked to the door of her office. She opened it. A man was standing in the waiting area. He was older, wearing a trench coat that looked like it had seen better days, but his eyes were sharp and alert. He held a thick, sealed manila envelope under his arm. "Miles," Reese said. "Ms. Halbrook," he nodded. He looked at me. "Nora, you look like him." He didn't mean the man in the photo. He meant Thomas. "You have the package?" Reese asked. Miles walked into the office and placed the envelope on the desk. It was sealed with red wax, an old-school touch that felt incredibly Thomas Wood. "Your father gave me this 18 months ago," Miles said. His voice was gravelly. He said, "Miles, my daughter is soft because I let her be soft, but if the wolves come for her, she is going to need teeth. This is the teeth." Reese looked at the cease and desist letter, the emergency petition, and the threatening texts. Then she looked at the sealed envelope. "Cassidy just filed an emergency motion based on blood," Reese said to Miles. "Does that satisfy the condition?" "It does," Miles said. "She used the blood to try and exclude her. The seal is broken." Reese didn't open it yet. She looked at me. "They want a meeting in New York," Reese said. "They want to ambush you." I looked at the envelope. I thought about the breathing on the phone. I thought about the HR director holding that file. I thought about the "another man's mistake" comment. The fear that had been gripping me for days began to harden into something else. It crystallized into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. "Let's go to New York," I said. Reese smiled. She picked up her phone and hit a speed dial button. "Grant?" she said when the line connected. Her voice was deceptively pleasant. "We received your invitation. Nora will be there. Oh, and Grant, make sure the conference room has a large table. We are bringing a lot of paperwork." She hung up. "Do not reply to your mother," Reese instructed. "Do not reply to Cassidy. Let them think you are coming to surrender. Let them think the silence is fear." I looked at the wax seal on the envelope. My father's initials were pressed into it, T.W. "Can we open it?" I asked. "Not yet," Reese said. "We open it on the plane, but I can tell you this much. Miles gave me the summary. Cassidy thinks she is bringing a knife to a gunfight. She has no idea she is standing on a landmine. I picked up my bag. The text message from the night before flashed in my mind. Do not come to New York. I was going to New York, and I wasn't just bringing a lawyer, I was bringing the ghost of Thomas Wood. And he was very, very angry. The flight to New York felt less like travel and more like the transportation of a prisoner, though I was not sure if I was the inmate or the executioner. Reese Halbrook sat next to me in seat 4A, reading a paperback novel as if we were not flying into the center of a hurricane. She had given me my instructions before we even boarded the plane, her voice low and uncompromising in the terminal. You are a statue, she had said. Today, you do not speak unless I touch your arm. You do not defend yourself. You do not cry. You do not get angry. Silence makes people nervous. Nora, especially people like your sister who feed on reaction, if you starve her of a reaction, she will start to make mistakes. I held on to those words as the elevator in the Wainwright and Locke building ascended 50 floors in seconds. My ears popped. The doors slid open to reveal a lobby that smelled of old leather and money. It was quiet, the kind of hushed, reverent silence usually reserved for cathedrals or morgues. We were ushered into Conference Room A. It was a corner office, a glass box suspended over the gray grid of Manhattan. In the center of the room was a mahogany table long enough to land a small aircraft on. My mother was already there. Veronica Wood sat on the left side of the table. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if the last week had physically compressed her. She was wearing a charcoal suit that was impeccable, but her posture was brittle. When I walked in, she flinched. Her eyes darted to my face and then immediately bounced away, fixing on a point somewhere near the window. She did not say hello. She did not ask how I was. She looked terrified. Good morning, Mrs. Wood, Reese said, her voice bright and professional. Mother just nodded, a jerky, mechanical motion. We took our seats on the opposite side. I placed my hands on the table, clasping them loosely. I focused on my breathing. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. 5 minutes later, the heavy double doors opened again. Cassidy entered. She did not walk. She swept into the room. She was wearing a white dress that looked like it had been sculpted onto her body, a deliberate choice to stand out against the dark suits of the lawyers. She looked radiant. She looked like a CEO arriving to accept an award. She carried a slim leather portfolio, and her chin was held high. She looked at me, and her lips curved into a pitying smile. Nora, she said, her voice smooth as silk. I am surprised you came. I thought you would have moved on by now. I did not answer. I looked at her, blinking once, slowly. Cassidy's smile faltered for a fraction of a second when she didn't get a response. She looked at Reese, sizing her up, then turned her attention to the head of the table. That was where Grant Wainwright sat. Grant was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He was the senior partner, the man who had managed Thomas Wood's empire for 30 years. He was not a man who got involved in petty family squabbles. The fact that he was personally running this meeting was a signal that the DEFCON level was maximum. But what caught Cassidy's eye wasn't Grant. It was the file in front of him. It was not the standard manila folder. It was a thick black binder, at least 3 inches deep. Next to it sat the sealed envelope Miles Ardent had delivered, its red wax seal still unbroken. Cassidy stared at the envelope. I saw her throat work as she swallowed. She knew that seal. Everyone in our family knew the specific, heavy way Dad used to seal his most private correspondence. Let us begin, Grant said. His voice was a deep baritone that demanded absolute attention. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. Let's make this quick. Grant, Cassidy said, taking her seat and crossing her legs. We all know why we are here. We need to formalize the removal of the non-lineage trustee so we can unfreeze the accounts. I have investors waiting. Grant looked at Cassidy over the rim of his reading glasses. He did not smile. That is an incorrect assumption, Ms. Wood, Grant said. Excuse me? Cassidy asked, her hand pausing on her water glass. This meeting was not called to discuss the removal of a trustee, Grant said. He opened the black binder. This meeting was automatically triggered by a specific set of conditions laid out by the late Thomas Wood in a codified addendum to his last will and testament. This is an activation hearing. The room went deadly silent. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Activation of what? Cassidy asked, her voice sharpening. The protective protocol, Grant said. He turned a page. The sound of the paper turning was loud in the quiet room. 18 months ago, Thomas Wood sat in this chair and drafted a conditional amendment to his estate plan. He was concerned about the stability of the family unit after his death. Specifically, he was concerned that his youngest daughter, Nora, would be targeted. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I remembered Reese's order, statue. I kept my face blank. Targeted, Cassidy scoffed. Grant, please, nobody is targeting anyone. We are dealing with facts, biological facts. We will get to the biology, Grant said, cutting her off with a wave of his hand. First, I must read the trigger clause into the record. He adjusted the binder and began to read. If any beneficiary of this trust utilizes genetic information, rumors of parentage, or questions of bloodline to attempt to humiliate, exclude, or disenfranchise Nora Wood, the following provisions shall immediately come into effect. Cassidy went pale. She looked at Mother. Mother had her eyes closed, her lips moving in a silent prayer. You can't be serious, Cassidy hissed. Dad didn't write that. He wouldn't. I witnessed the signature myself, Grant said. As did 2 other partners. Thomas was very specific. He anticipated that you might use Nora's paternity as a weapon. He called it the nuclear option, and he left instructions on what to do if you push the button. Grant looked up, his eyes hard. You push the button, Cassidy. I revealed the truth. Cassidy slammed her hand on the table. She is not his daughter. She is a fraud. The truth, Grant said calmly, triggered the penalty phase because the condition has been met. The governance structure of the Wood Family Trust has shifted effective this morning. He slid a piece of paper across the table toward Cassidy. Under the standard will, you and Nora were co-executors with equal voting power, Grant explained. However, under the protective protocol, the instigator of the lineage attack is deemed hostile to the unity of the estate. Therefore, your voting rights on the board are suspended for a period of 5 years. Cassidy's mouth fell open. Suspended and, Grant continued, relentless. The role of primary managing trustee is immediately assigned to the target of the attack, to ensure her protection against further aggression. Grant looked at me. Nora Wood is now the sole administrator of the Baythorne estate and the majority vote holder for the shipping logistics firm. The silence that followed was total. It was the silence of a bomb going off and sucking all the oxygen out of the room. I sat there, stunned. I had expected a defense. I had expected Reese to have to fight for my share. I never expected that my father had built a trapdoor that would drop Cassidy into the basement the moment she tried to push me off the roof. Cassidy stood up. Her chair flew back and hit the wall with a crash. "This is insane," she screamed. The poise was gone, the CEO facade shattered, revealing the tantrum-prone child beneath. "You are giving the company to a bastard. She isn't even a Wood. Look at the DNA." She reached into her portfolio and pulled out a copy of the test results, the ones I had refused to look at during dinner. She threw them onto the table. They skidded across the mahogany and stopped in front of Grant. "Read it." Cassidy yelled. 0% match. She is nothing. She is another man's mistake. How can she run the family business when she isn't family? Grant looked down at the paper. He didn't pick it up. He just sighed, a sound of profound fatigue. "Sit down, Ms. Wood," Grant said. "I will not sit down. I am going to sue this firm for malpractice. I am going to contest the will. Dad was clearly senile when he wrote that." "Thomas Wood was perfectly sane," Grant said, "and he was perfectly aware of the biology." Grant reached for the sealed envelope, the one with the red wax. He cracked the seal. The sound was like a bone snapping. He pulled out a single sheet of heavy cream-colored paper. "This is a notarized affidavit. Signed by Thomas Wood 10 years ago. Grant said, "Would you like me to read it?" Cassidy stood there, panting, her chest heaving. She didn't answer. Grant read it anyway. I, Thomas Wood, acknowledge that Nora Wood is not my biological issue. I have known this since the date of her conception. I chose to sign her birth certificate. I chose to raise her. I chose to be her father. Any attempt to use her biology to invalidate her standing in this family is an insult not to her, but to my judgment and my choice. She is my daughter by right of love and law, and that bond supersedes blood. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. I couldn't help it. The statue cracked. He knew. He had always known, all those years, when I felt like an imposter. He knew I didn't belong, and he loved me anyway. He hadn't been tricked. He hadn't been a victim of my mother's affair. He had been a participant in my life by choice. He knew, Cassidy whispered. Her voice was small, trembling. He knew and he didn't care. He cared very much, Grant said. He cared enough to protect her from you. Grant reached into the black binder again. And regarding your claim that you discovered this recently, Grant said, his voice turning cold as ice. We have the forensic accounting report. He held up a spreadsheet. You claimed at the birthday dinner that this was a sudden revelation, but this credit card statement shows the purchase of the Gen ID kit on a card linked to your personal discretionary fund. The date of purchase was 3 months ago. Grant looked at Cassidy over his glasses. You bought the kit weeks before you gave it to her. You waited. You staged the dinner. You planned the humiliation. That proves malice. And malice is what triggers the penalty clause regarding your inheritance. Penalty clause? Cassidy asked. She sank back into her chair. She looked like she was going to be sick. The protective protocol has a financial component, Grant said. Because you brought a frivolous challenge based on bloodline, effectively wasting the estate's resources and causing emotional distress to the managing trustee. The legal costs of this meeting and the costs of any subsequent defense are deducted directly from your personal share of the trust. Grant tapped the table. And, if you proceed with a lawsuit to contest this, the no contest clause activates. You will lose your entire inheritance, not just the voting rights, the money, all of it. Grant closed the binder. Thump. So, Grant said, folding his hands, you have a choice. Cassidy, you can accept the new structure, step down from the board, and keep your dividends, or you can sue, prove in court that your father loved Nora despite her biology, and lose every dime you have. The room was quiet again. I looked at my mother. She was crying silently, her head in her hands. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying because the story she had tried to protect the perfect Wood family was dead. The truth was out, and it was ugly, and it was written into the legal record. I looked at Cassidy. She was staring at the table, at the DNA test she had thrown. It was supposed to be her weapon. It was supposed to be the thing that cut me out. Instead, it was the evidence that had locked her out. She looked at the red wax seal on Dad's letter. She looked at me. For the first time in my life, I didn't see the superior, perfect sister. I saw a woman who had gambled everything on cruelty and lost. Reese leaned over to me. She didn't whisper, but her voice was low enough that only I could hear it. Checkmate, she said. I looked at Grant. I accept the role of managing trustee, I said. My voice was clear. It didn't shake. And I would like to review the current financial standing of the estate. Specifically, the accounts my sister has been accessing for the last 4 months. Cassidy's head snapped up. Panic, raw and real, flooded her eyes. You can't, she stammered. We aren't done here. Oh, we are done with the meeting, I said, channeling every ounce of Thomas Wood I could find in my soul. Now, we are starting the audit. The silence in the boardroom was no longer the hushed reverence of a cathedral. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a courtroom just before the gavel comes down on a guilty verdict. Grant Wainwright did not give Cassidy time to recover from the shock of losing her voting rights. He did not give her a moment to process the fact that our father had anticipated her cruelty. He simply turned the page of the black binder. The sound of the heavy paper turning was loud, crisp, and final. "We move now to the matter of conduct," Grant said. His voice was devoid of emotion, which made it all the more terrifying. "As part of the protective protocol, Mr. Ardent was authorized to compile a retroactive log of interactions during the final 6 months of Thomas Wood's life. This was to ensure that no undue influence was exerted during his period of medical vulnerability." Cassidy shifted in her chair. "This is an invasion of privacy. You had a private investigator spying on us inside the house. We had an investigator logging entry and exit times and cross-referencing them with legal document modifications," Grant corrected. He pulled a sheet of paper from the file and held it up. "For example, on August 14th, the logs show you entered the study at 2 in the afternoon. You remained there for 45 minutes. During that time, the nurse on duty noted in her medical chart, which we have subpoenaed, that Thomas was experiencing severe confusion and agitation due to a medication adjustment." Grant looked at Cassidy over his glasses. "Yet, on that same day, a transfer authorization for $75,000 was signed. The signature, when analyzed by our forensic expert, shows significant tremors inconsistent with his baseline, but consistent with someone guiding his hand." "I was helping him," Cassidy blurted out. Her face was flushing a deep, blotchy red. "He wanted to sign it. His hand was shaking because he was sick, not because I was forcing him. How dare you twist his suffering into this?" "We also have the witness statement from Arthur Penhaligon," Grant continued, ignoring her outburst entirely. "He confirms that Thomas had no memory of authorizing the liquidity transfer for the fleet maintenance, a transfer that you personally delivered." Grant laid the document down and picked up another. He was building a wall, brick by brick, trapping her inside. "And then there are the expenditures," Grant said. "What expenditures?" Cassidy's lawyer spoke up for the first time. He was a slick man in a blue suit who had walked in looking confident, but now looked like he was searching for the nearest fire exit. "My client has been acting as a provisional steward. Any funds used were for the maintenance of the estate." "Is that so?" Grant asked. "Because according to the audit triggered by the protocol, we have identified a series of withdrawals labeled as consulting fees paid to a shell company registered in Delaware. The principal owner of that shell company is listed as one Cassidy Wood." My breath caught in my throat. I looked at my sister. She wasn't just power-hungry. She was embezzling. She had been siphoning money out of the accounts while Dad was dying, betting that once she took control, she could bury the paper trail. "The total amount withdrawn in the last 4 months is $215,000, Grant stated. "That is not maintenance. That is theft." "It was an advance," Cassidy cried. Her voice was shrill now, cracking under the pressure. "I was going to pay it back once the probate cleared. I have expenses. I have to maintain the image of this family since she pointed a shaking finger at me, was off in Wisconsin playing peasant." "Theft from a trust is a felony," Reese said. She spoke softly, but her words cut through the room like a razor. "And since you are a trustee, it is also a breach of fiduciary duty. We could have you arrested before lunch." Cassidy's lawyer leaned away from her. It was a subtle movement, just a few inches. But in the language of litigation, it was an abandonment. He knew she was radioactive. "Now," Grant said, "we come to the penalty." He turned to the back of the binder. "The protective protocol is very clear on the consequences of a baseless challenge to the lineage. It states that if a beneficiary attempts to invalidate a fellow heir based on biology when the testator has explicitly recognized them, the challenging party forfeits their right to the no-contest protection." Grant looked directly at Cassidy. "That means, Ms. Wood, that if you proceed with any legal action to contest Nora's position, or if you fail to return the $215,000 within 7 days, the estate will trigger the clawback provision." "What does that mean?" Cassidy whispered. "It means you will be disinherited," Grant said. "Completely. You will be removed from the will entirely. The house, the trust, the shares, everything goes to Nora, and we will sue you personally for the return of the stolen funds, plus legal fees." Cassidy looked like she had been slapped. She turned to her lawyer. "Do something. Tell them they can't do this." The lawyer cleared his throat. He closed his own file folder. "Cassidy, if these documents are authenticated, your father really signed that affidavit acknowledging Nora, then you have no case. If we go to court, you will lose, and you could face criminal charges for the funds." "I am not losing," Cassidy screamed. She spun toward our mother. "Mother, tell them this is ridiculous. Tell them about the affair. Tell them Nora isn't one of us." All eyes turned to Veronica Wood. My mother sat frozen. She looked at Cassidy, whose face was twisted in ugly, desperate rage. Then she looked at me. I was sitting perfectly still, my hands folded, watching her. I wasn't pleading for her help anymore. I was the managing trustee. I was the one holding the keys to the kingdom she had spent her life polishing. If she spoke up for Cassidy, she would be aligning herself with a thief and a bully. She would be admitting that she allowed this abuse to happen, but more importantly, she realized that she could no longer control the story. The script she had written was burning, and I was the one holding the match. Mother opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked down at her hands. She started, her voice barely a whisper. "I think we should listen to Mr. Wainwright." Cassidy gasped. It was a sound of pure betrayal. "You coward! You spineless coward!" "That is enough," Reese said. She stood up. She didn't look like a lawyer anymore. She looked like an executioner. "We are done with the theatrics. Here are the terms." Reese slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "You will return the funds by next Friday. You will vacate the Baythorn estate within 30 days so that the new managing trustee can conduct a full inventory, and you will cease all contact with Nora. No texts, no calls to her employer, no breathing into the phone at 3 a.m. Cassidy's head snapped up. She didn't think we knew about the calls. "If you violate these terms," Reese continued, "we will file the criminal complaint for embezzlement, and we will petition for full disinheritance. Do you understand?" Cassidy didn't answer. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving. She looked around the room, looking for an ally, looking for a weapon, looking for anything she could use. But there was nothing. The room was clean. The evidence was stacked. The trap was sprung. Grant cleared his throat. "There is one final item," he said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a smaller envelope. It was not manila. It was made of thick, heavy cardstock, the color of cream. It was sealed with the same red wax, but it was smaller, more intimate. He did not put it on the table. He held it out directly to me. "Thomas left this with specific instructions," Grant said softly. He said, "If the day comes that they try to strip her name away, give her this. It is the only proof she needs." I reached out and took the envelope. It felt heavy in my hand. My name was written on the front in my father's sprawling handwriting. Nora. Just my name. No Wood. Just Nora. "What is that?" Cassidy demanded. Her voice was weak, but the jealousy was still there, burning like a dying ember. "What did he leave her Moneymore shares?" "It is not money," Grant said. "It is sealed under attorney-client privilege. Only Nora is permitted to open it." "It is probably just a sentimental letter," Cassidy spat. "Something about how much he pity-loved her." "No," Grant said. "It is not a letter." I looked at the envelope. I could feel the shape of something inside. It wasn't paper. It was harder. "It is unfair," Cassidy cried, tears finally spilling over. "I was the one who was there. I was the one who ran the house. I was the one who kept the name pure. Why does she get everything? She is a mistake. She is a stain on this family." "We are not talking about stains, Cassidy," I said. My voice was calm. It was the first time I had spoken since the meeting began. The sound of my own voice startled them. It was deeper, stronger. "We are talking about choices," I said. "You chose to be cruel. You chose to steal. You chose to try and destroy my life because you were insecure about your own place in this world. I stood up. I held the sealed envelope in my hand. And Dad chose me, I said. He didn't choose me because of blood. He chose me because he knew I was the only one who would protect what he actually built. Not the money, the integrity. I looked at my mother. She was weeping openly now, ruins streaming down her face. I am going to audit the books, I told them. Every penny, every receipt. If I find one more dollar missing, Cassidy, I won't just sue you, I will destroy you. I turned to Reese. I am ready to go. Wait, Cassidy stood up, reaching out as if to grab the envelope from my hand. You can't just leave. You have to tell us what is in there. I have a right to know. Reese stepped between us, blocking Cassidy with her shoulder. You have no rights, Reese said coldly. You are a suspended trustee with a pending repayment schedule. Sit down. Cassidy stood there, trembling. She looked at the envelope in my hand with a hunger that was terrifying. She looked at it like it was a bomb that was about to go off, or a life raft she had just missed. It was the one thing she couldn't buy, couldn't steal, and couldn't bully out of me. It was a secret between a father and his daughter. I turned my back on them. I walked toward the heavy double doors. Nora, Cassidy screamed behind me. You are nothing. Do you hear me? You are nothing. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I signaled for Reese to follow me. As the heavy doors closed behind us, cutting off Cassidy's screams, the silence returned. But it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of victory. I looked down at the envelope in my hand. I ran my thumb over the red wax seal. I didn't know what was inside yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever it was the truth. And for the first time in 33 years, the truth was on my side. I did not walk out the door. Reese was holding it open for me, ready to usher me into the safety of the corridor, but I stopped. The heavy cream envelope in my hand felt warm, as if it retained the heat of the hand that had sealed it years ago. I looked at the red wax, the imprint of my father's initials, and I realized that leaving now would be running. It would be taking the victory and fleeing before the dust settled. I was done running. I turned back around. Cassidy was still standing by the table, her face a mask of ruined mascara and disbelief. Grant Wainwright was watching me with a look of quiet expectation. My mother was staring at the floor. I walked back to the table. I placed the envelope in the center of the mahogany surface, right next to the DNA test Cassidy had thrown earlier. We are going to read it together, I said. Nora, Reese warned, stepping up beside me. You do not have to do this. That is privileged. I know, I said, but they need to hear it. They need to understand that this was not a legal maneuver. This was a conversation. I cracked the seal. The wax crumbled onto the table like dried blood. Inside, there were 2 documents. One was a formal legal instrument, stamped and notarized. The other was a handwritten letter on personal stationery. The handwriting was unmistakable, the sharp, slanted script of Thomas Wood. I picked up the letter. My hands were steady. I began to read aloud, my voice echoing in the silent boardroom. My dearest Nora, if you are reading this, it means the worst has happened. It means that the jealousy I watched fester in your sister for 30 years has finally boiled over, and she has tried to use your origins to hurt you. For that, I am profoundly sorry. I paused. I could hear Cassidy's jagged breathing. I have known since the day your mother told me she was pregnant that you were not my biological child. The timing, the circumstances I knew, and I want you to know, with absolute certainty, that it never mattered, not for a single second. Biology is an accident. Nora, fatherhood is a choice. When I held you in the hospital, I made a choice. I chose you. I chose to be your dad, your protector, and your guide. The man who contributed your DNA was a fleeting mistake in your mother's life. You were never the mistake. You were the best thing that came out of the wreckage. I looked up. My mother had covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. But I also saw how you grew up. I saw you shrinking. I saw you hiding in the library to avoid Cassidy's sharp tongue. I saw you trying to make yourself invisible so you wouldn't be a target. My greatest regret is that I did not stop it sooner. I thought if I just loved you enough, it would balance the scales. I was wrong. Love is not enough when you are dealing with wolves. So, I have built you a steel frame. I knew Cassidy would wait until I was gone to strike. I knew she would use the blood argument because it is the only weapon she has. She thinks blood makes her a queen. She does not understand that character makes a leader. Do not let them shame you. You are a Wood because I said so, and I am the only one whose vote counts. Love, Dad. I lowered the letter. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a holy silence, the kind that follows a eulogy. Cassidy was slumped in her chair. For the first time in her life, she looked small. The narrative she had built that she was the rightful heir defending the fortress against an imposter had just been dismantled by the very man she claimed to represent. Grant reached out and took the second document from the table. "This," Grant said, his voice grave, "is the mechanism Thomas refers to as the steel frame. It is a notarized durable power of attorney and a codicil to the trust." Grant put on his glasses. "It grants Nora Wood unilateral authority to conduct forensic audits on any business venture attached to the family name. It also includes a specific clause, the Anti-Defamation Protocol. If Cassidy Wood, or any agent acting on her behalf, continues to publicly or privately disparage Nora Wood's legitimacy, the trust is authorized to liquidate Cassidy's personal assets to fund a defamation lawsuit against herself." Grant looked at Cassidy. "In plain English, Cassidy, if you speak about this again, you are paying for Nora to sue you. And you are paying with your own house." Cassidy didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just stared at the table. The fight had gone out of her. The star had been unplugged. She realized, finally, that she wasn't the protagonist of this story. She was the antagonist, and she had just been written out of the sequel. "We need a signature," Grant said. He slid a single sheet of paper toward Cassidy. "This is a voluntary withdrawal of your emergency petition. It states that you acknowledge Nora Wood as the rightful managing trustee and that you retract all allegations of fraud. Sign it, and we will not trigger the immediate disinheritance. We will stick to the repayment plan for the stolen funds." Cassidy looked at the pen. She looked at me. There was no hatred in her eyes anymore, just a vast, empty shock. She picked up the pen. Her hand trembled violently. She signed her name. It was a messy scrawl. Nothing like her usual arrogant signature. "It is done," Grant said. He took the paper and placed it in his file. "The meeting is adjourned." Cassidy stood up. She moved like an old woman. She didn't look at anyone. She walked to the door, opened it, and disappeared into the hallway. She didn't slam the door. She just let it click shut. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight lift off my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was relief. It was the feeling of setting down a heavy pack I'd been carrying for 3 decades. "We should go," Reese said gently. We walked out of the conference room and into the lobby. The elevator was waiting. "Nora," I stopped. My mother was standing near the reception desk. She had dried her tears, but her face was ravaged. She looked stripped of her armor. "Go ahead," I told Reese. "I will be right down." Reese nodded and stepped into the elevator, holding the door for a moment before letting it close. I turned to my mother. "I wanted to explain," she said. Her voice was thin. "That man, your biological father, it was a confusing time. Thomas and I were having trouble. I was lonely. It wasn't about you, Nora. It was never about you." "I know," I said. "Dad told me. It was a mistake." "I wanted to tell you," she pleaded, "but I was so afraid. I was afraid Thomas would leave me. I was afraid of the scandal. I spent my whole life trying to keep this family perfect. I did it for us." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had criticized my posture, my clothes, and my quietness for 33 years. I looked at the woman who had sat at that dinner table and said nothing while Cassidy handed me a box of shame. "You didn't do it for us," I said calmly. "You did it for yourself. You loved the image of the perfect family more than you loved the people in it. You let me feel like an alien in my own house just so you wouldn't have to admit you had an affair. I love you, Nora, she whispered. I believe you, I said. But you love your secrets more. I took a step back, creating a physical boundary between us. You can tell the truth now. Mother, you can tell everyone, or you can keep lying. It doesn't matter to me anymore, but I'm not carrying it for you. I am not the keeper of your reputation. What are you going to do? She asked. I am going back to Wisconsin. I said, I have a job. I have a life. I will manage the estate, but I will do it from my office in Madison. I am not moving back to Baythorn. That house is just an asset now. It isn't my home. Will I see you? I don't know, I said honestly. The audit is going to take a long time. We will see what the numbers say. I turned and walked to the elevator. I pressed the button. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and didn't look back. The flight back to Wisconsin was quiet. I sat by the window, watching the lights of the cities below fade into the darkness of the countryside. I held the letter in my lap. For years, I had defined myself by what I wasn't. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't the beautiful one. I wasn't the biological daughter. I had let Cassidy and my mother write my character description. But as the plane touched down in Madison, I realized that story was over. I drove back to my apartment. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs. I unlocked the door. It was quiet. It was beige. It was simple. But for the first time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like a fortress. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I saw the empty space on the counter where I usually kept my mail. I thought about the DNA kit I had bought, the one from the other company, the one I had planned to use to find the veils. I picked it up from the drawer where I had stashed it. I looked at it for a long time. Discover your origins. I walked over to the trash can and dropped it in. I didn't need to know who the man in the photo was. I didn't need to know if I had his eyes or his chin. He was a biological fact, a variable in an equation that had been solved 33 years ago. I knew who my father was. My father was the man who packed a backpack for me. My father was the man who taught me how to read a balance sheet. My father was the man who wrote a letter from the grave to make sure I would be safe. Cassidy had tried to use blood to break me. She thought that if she cut the biological tie, I would wither away. She didn't realize that blood is just fluid. Love is the steel. I took a sip of water. I set the glass down. Happy birthday, Nora, I whispered to the quiet room. I went to my desk and opened my laptop. I had a lot of work to do. The audit of the Wood estate was starting tomorrow at 8 in the morning, and unlike my sister, I was never late. I chose myself, and that was the only inheritance that mattered. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know where you are tuning in from, whether it is during your morning commute, a late-night study session, or just relaxing at home. If you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.